This was the last day of school, and I could feel it. I was sitting at a table by myself, half-heartedly eating my lunch when I got the text from my girlfriend, Rachel. "You're still working on your report?" She texted. "You should be done by now." I sighed and looked around the cafeteria, which was pretty much empty. The other students who were usually eating here during lunchtime were either still in the library or in the courtyard, finishing up their last class of the day. I had been putting off finishing up my report for Rachel's English class since the end of last week, and it was already the last day of the semester. I knew it would suck if I missed this deadline, but I really didn't want to work on it right now. I couldn't bring myself to focus, even though I knew how important it was to me. I sighed again and started to fiddle with my phone. It had been a couple of months since we started dating, but Rachel and I hadn't made love yet. That wasn't for lack of trying. We'd been out on a bunch of dates. We'd even made out once or twice, but there was still something holding her back, and I still had no idea what that something was. I had given Rachel some advice earlier that morning when we were talking about our plans for this weekend. She was going away for spring break, which meant I'd have the apartment to myself. I wanted to take some time and really figure out what it was about her that was holding me back, but I also knew she didn't want to talk about it. So I had asked if maybe she would come over to my place this weekend, and she had said yes. I guess that's the first step, I thought to myself, but then I remembered that she probably wouldn't be alone. I could feel my face turning red as I realized Rachel might bring one of her friends along with her. I hadn't talked to her about this at all. I was worried that she was going to show up with one of those stuck-up girls from the in-crowd. I was still fiddling with my phone, trying to get my mind off the fact that Rachel was bringing a friend over this weekend, when I felt someone sit down at my table. I looked up and saw it was none other than Rachel herself. "Hey!" she said happily as she sat down across from me. "Sorry if I'm late." "No, you're right on time," I told her as I looked down at my phone again. I was just thinking about. "Hey," she said, cutting me off. "Don't worry about your report. You can do that next week." "Yeah, sure," I muttered as I looked back up at her. She was looking at me with those big green eyes that she always had, but something about her seemed different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. "What's up?" "You seem distracted," she said as she pulled out her lunch tray and opened it up. "You haven't touched your lunch, and you've been playing with your phone for almost 5 minutes now." I looked back down at my phone and saw I had missed a bunch of texts while I was fumbling with it earlier. "Oh," I said. "Sorry, Rachel." She took out her sandwich, grabbed a couple of napkins, and started spreading some mustard on the bread. She held up a sandwich for me to see, but I didn't move to grab it. I stammered. "Why are you here?" She stared at me for a moment. "You don't know?" she finally asked. "You didn't get my message?" I shook my head as I watched her take a huge bite out of her sandwich. She chewed for a second, swallowed, and then gave me a sad look. "Oh," I said as I looked back down at my phone. "You must have missed my response." "I guess so," she said, taking another bite of her sandwich. "But then why didn't you call me back?" "What?" I asked as I looked up from my phone. "You never called me back?" She shook her head as she took another bite of her sandwich. "No," she mumbled around the mouthful of food in her mouth. "What's going on, Rachel?" I asked as I leaned in towards her and lowered my voice. "What happened?" She paused for a moment, and then she smiled at me. "You know what happened?" "No," I said as I shook my head. "I really don't." She looked me in the eyes and gave me that look again. "I want us to make love. Matt." My face flushed as I heard those words come out of her mouth, and I quickly looked away from her and stared down at my phone again. I felt like someone was watching me, but I kept my eyes down on the screen as I quickly typed out a response. "What?" I asked. "Are you serious? Did you change your mind?" "Of course not," she said with a laugh. "But you know what I mean." "No," I told her. "I don't know what you mean. This is really confusing to me. What happened? Why did you suddenly change your mind?" She reached out for my phone and pulled it away from me before I could stop her. "Matt," she said as she leaned over towards me with a frown on her face. "Just say yes. Okay? Just tell me that you want to make love to me." I glanced up at her, and then I looked back down at my phone as I thought about what to say. I knew this was the perfect opportunity, so I could finally ask her about all those times when she said no and pull back the veil on why she kept saying no to me. But before I could type out a single word, she leaned over towards me again and put her hand on my cheek. "Say yes," she whispered into my ear. I closed my eyes and sighed as I felt her soft lips press against mine. It was nice at first, but then I felt her tongue start to move around inside my mouth as she tried to force herself on top of me. "No!" I cried out as I pushed her off of me. "I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to cheat on Rachel." "Fine," she shouted back as she got up from the table and stormed off towards the door. "I'll just go tell her." I looked down at my phone and saw that Rachel had already sent me a text message. She wanted to meet up later to talk about the situation. I sighed and put the phone back in my pocket as I watched her disappear out of the cafeteria. This was a terrible situation, and it was only getting worse by the day. If only there was a way for me to get back at Rachel without hurting her feelings. Then I remembered that there was a way. I had almost forgotten about it, but I could still count on it working just like it always did. That was one thing about having a girlfriend. She could be very predictable. I sighed as I stood up from the table and made my way towards the exit. There's only one place where I know she'll be.